Day unwritten. These words by the Reverend David Brendan. The day unwritten. Welcome to a new story. Welcome to a day unwritten. We gather to speak of possibility. We remember the losses. We celebrate the victories. We embrace the possible over than the probable, weaving a story then of hope. Join us in a new story. Join us in the day unwritten. Join us in the future of possibility. The day unwritten. This is an appropriate sentiment this now a handful of days into this new year, which is to say, some of the new year is already written, but this day has not been written. And so we begin to write it here together this particular Sunday, and so we welcome you for writing this day with us at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon. And Happy New Year, everyone. This is the first Sunday of the new year, even though New Year's was a little bit ago. Or as Danny said to me this morning when I said, Happy New Year's, he said, Happy New Moment. And I thought, well, that's a very nuanced way of looking at this life, but it's true. Happy New Moment. So who all has made resolutions this year, and who all still has a perfect record? I have learned make easy resolutions, and your success rate goes up exponentially. I think the only resolution I have adamantly kept my entire life is that of committing to flossing about 20 years ago. And as resolutions go, and as my dentist would be proud to say, that's not a bad one. But we find ourselves here at the beginning of this new year, and things feel a little fresh, a little unwritten. There is this sense at the beginning of this 2025 that yes, there will be challenges ahead as January proceeds forward. That the year is unwritten and our lives are unwritten. And so we come together in a place like this to proclaim that love is at the center of our lives and of our community together. And so we welcome you here, whether you have founded this place or it's your first Sunday here because you thought to yourself, maybe in this new year I'll start going and seeing what a congregation is all about. And we welcome you here as well. We welcome you here no matter your life story, and we'll talk about life stories today. What an interesting thing. Each of us has a life story. And the question becomes then, where did that story come from? Who writes that story? Who's in charge of that narrative? So we welcome you, despite your life story, your race, the color of your skin, your income level, your age, your ability. We welcome you no matter what it is you're seeking in life. As long as you are seeking love to be woven into that, we welcome you here as we continue the ongoing journey of this fellowship to explore what that word love means, how it interacts with our life, and how we can help bring more of it into the world. Well, one of the ways we wanted to bring you into this new year was smoothly. And so we did that by inviting Draven Schmidt to be our guest musician this first Sunday of the month. Draven is a local music educator. He's been here in Central Oregon for about 10 years. He gigs in different jazz, of course, and R&B and blues bands. He started our service with that classic song by Hoagy Carmichael, Stardust. He's got some more treasures for us later, including some Stevie Wonder to begin our year. But we're glad that he's here. One of our friends works at the Food Lot, and we were talking about this idea that we have guest musicians here on the first Sunday of the month. And they said, well, we just had this guy. He plays the saxophone. And I said, well, we've never had a saxophone here. So I called up Draven, and he said he would love to be here, and we are so grateful that he is here with us. Yep. Well, we started smooth and with Hoagy Carmichael. So let's bring it up a notch. I'll invite you to rise and bow to your spirit as we sing our opening song, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And there's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing, there's a river flowing, there's a river flowing in my soul.
Good morning. I'm Judy Hurlbert, and this is Leslie Koch to light the chalice. We light this chalice to help us move from untruth to truth, to help us move from ignorance to wisdom, to help us move from animosity to love, to help us move from bondage to freedom. We rededicate ourselves before this light to affirm and practice truth, wisdom, love, and freedom, today and in the days to come.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Good morning. My name is Amy Brock, and I'm the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth. And it's a new month and a new year. And we have a theme this month that is story. And so it's time for our Time for All Ages, where we sometimes tell a story. So while our young people are finding their way to the rug this morning for our story together, I invite you to think about what your favorite part of a story is. So, what is your favorite part of the story? Do you think like the beginning or the middle or the end? When the horrifying part happens.
Ooh.
It's very
The
exciting.
conflict. The conflict.
The whole story.
Whole
The whole story
story.
can be your favorite, yeah. I kind of like the beginning, the foreshadowing
Begin-
part.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I was once told you can't have a story without conflict. It's part of the narrative arc of a story. I thought, surely you can have a story without conflict. And then I started to look at every single story I've ever read in my entire life, and sure enough, something goes wrong. Yeah. Well, see if you can spot the point of conflict. Since stories are our theme, I thought I'd tell you a story this morning. It's a story about a tiger. So this tiger, I don't know, what was the tiger's name? Can I get some help here? George the tiger. So George the tiger lived in the jungle. And George was the most beautiful and powerful tiger you could ever imagine. Like the orange was super bright orange, and the black was a deep black on the stripes, and the white was just glowing white and so beautiful. And one day, out in the jungle, this very, very cruel, mean man came and captured George, took him away from his home in the jungle, and put him in a cage. Put him in a cage. And he said, I'm glad I've got you here because you are tiny, you are pathetic, you are nothing. Well, that didn't sit well with George. George wasn't sure about George's self, as some of us, have self-doubt sometimes. And when this mean man told George that he was puny and nothing, George started to believe it. Well, the man kept the cage, a little bit away from his house. And so every day he would go out, and he would give George a bowl of food and a bowl of water. And one day George was drinking the water, or getting ready to, before, the tongue went down in there, made all the ripples, looked at it, and George saw George's reflection in the water. And George saw something really interesting. George said, wait a second. That looks like an incredibly beautiful and powerful tiger. Maybe I'm a beautiful and powerful tiger. The man overheard George saying this and came over really quickly and said, no, you're not. No, you're not. Don't get any ideas there, pal. You are puny and small and ugly and weak. And George said, okay, I guess I am. Laid back down. Well, after George ate, sometimes he would start feeling, full, but also that food going into his body and giving him energy, and he would start to pace in his cage, and he would start to feel like, whoa, this feels good. Even though it's very small, I'd like to be out there. I'm stuck in this cage, but I'm feeling this power in my body. I feel really powerful, like I could do anything, like I'm a powerful tiger. The man heard him saying this out loud. He ran over, he said, no, don't get any ideas there, George, as I understand your name is. You are small and ugly and weak and puny. George laid back down and said, I guess I am, if that guy is telling me that I am. And so, one day, George is laying down in his cage, and along comes a lion. And this lion sees this beautiful, powerful tiger sitting there in the cage and says, hey, what are you doing in there? And he said, well, what else am I going to do? I'm stuck in here. And the lion wondered and said out loud, you are a beautiful, maybe the most beautiful, and clearly powerful tiger I have ever seen in this jungle. I think you should try and get out of that cage. And George said, I don't think I can. And the lion said, I think you can. I think you should try. Give it a whirl, man. And so, George said, okay, I'll try. And he got up his gusto, and he looked at the cage gate in front of him, and he plowed into it, and he went flying out into the yard. Yes, he's free. Yes. So George toppled, somersaulted, got back up on his four paws, and looked at the lion and said, whoa, that was really easy. And the lion said, there wasn't even a lock on that cage. And George, there wasn't a lock? I just sat in there the whole time and it wasn't even locked? And the lion said, yeah, That can happen when we believe untruths that other people tell us. That can happen when we believe things about ourselves that aren't true, that diminish us and make us feel smaller. So George looked up at the cage and the open door and thought to himself, well, now I am sure of who I am, despite what that man says. I am a beautiful and a powerful tiger. About that time, the man comes out to check on George. He sees this tiger in his yard. George turns and looks at him, and he gives him his best, most powerful and beautiful tiger growl that he could ever conceive of, and the man got out of there pretty quick. So that's the story of how George got out of his cage. What do you think about... So if we're going to... I was an English major. So if we're going to look at the narrative arc of this story, there was a moment of conflict, right? When did things go wrong for George?
When he thinks he's small and puny.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, when he thinks he's small and puny. And why did he think that?
Because the man was telling him.
Right, somebody else told him that. Do you believe every single thing that anybody says about you? No.
In fact, I believe nothing.
Yeah.
I think nothing, but I think the man left the cage unlocked because he thought the lion wasn't strong enough to even open the cage door.
Thinks that he left it unlocked because he didn't think the lion was strong enough to even open the door. But the way he did that...
The tiger even wasn't strong enough to even open a door that was unlocked.
Underestimated
Underestimated him, right? He convinced George that he wasn't strong enough, even though that he was. He convinced him.
And George didn't even know that the cage was unlocked.
George didn't even know it was unlocked, 'cause he didn't even try, because he believed what this guy told him about him. Well,
And he believed that the cage was locked.
that's right. He believed it was locked. So,
Sad.
it is sad.
Very.
But how did the story end?
He got out.
Narrative arc. It went back up, right?
And the man was like,
If the story had ended with George just sitting in the cage and the lion coming up and saying, I think you're actually beautiful and I think you're powerful, and George had just said, no, I'm not, and the lion walked off, would that be a very good story? No. But the story continued on because the story wasn't done at that point. Sometimes things feel hard, sometimes we feel small, but the story is not done. The story is not done. The story continues on, and we believe in ourselves that we are each beautiful. We are each powerful. I'm here to tell you that. Let me be the lion in your life and tell you that you are beautiful and you are powerful, no matter who might be telling you otherwise and different. Amen.
Well, I don't think that we have any lions and tigers in RE today, but we do have
Bears?
a lot of... No bears.
Oh
No
my.
bears either.
Oh my.
No. But we do have a lot of really special friends who have a lot of energy today, and each of us has our own story. So we're going to explore our own story that we have and how that comes together when we bring those into a space together. So I'm excited. There might be some growling along the way.
I bet there is.
Probably.
I bet there is.
But before we go, we need to say our children's covenant. In this place, I am kind. In this place, I am loving. In this place, I am a friend to the earth and all animals and people. In this place, I am loved.
Let's make an arch if you're in the middle, and our kids will head out.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
From you. Are there joys and sorrows?
Good morning and Happy New Year from me, Chayla Sloper, the Congregational Life Facilitator. I have today's announcements, and I want to bring to your attention, well, first, of course, a special welcome to those on Zoom and those who might be here for the first or second time. We just want to make sure that you know we have a weekly email that keeps us in touch with what's going on. A lot of it duplicates what's in your Skyline, so be sure to check out the Skyline that you received today. And some things are not duplicated. There are other things there that you might be interested in finding out about that aren't in the Skyline. So I have a couple of housekeeping things first. And I wanted to remind you that if you, in your expression of generosity to the congregation, prefer to give cash, and if you would like to have a tax record, we wouldn't know who the cash comes from, but we have now these cash offering envelopes. And so they're not necessary, but if you would like to have a record that you can use for your later reporting, then be sure to use these. Also, I wanted to bring to your attention that at the bottom of the front page on the Skyline is the address of the building. Last week we had a little event that we'll hear a little bit more about during Joys and Sorrows, but if we ever had to call emergency services and they asked the address, you should know that if you don't have it in your mind, that it is there on the front of the Skyline. So this is just a useful piece of information for all of us to have, because we just never know what's going to happen. So we do invite everyone who's here today to join us for coffee after the service. We have some refreshments, and there are beautiful flowers as well, courtesy of our heartfelt remembrance of our member Tricia Bell. So we celebrated her life and remembered her yesterday. So we have some treats today as well. Okay, so today, after the service, we have a newcomer welcome. If you're new-ish to Unitarian Universalism or new to this congregation, we invite you to come to the library. It's the fireside room where the fireplace is at about 11:30. That'll give you time to grab a cup of coffee, and you can bring your beverage there. Reverend Scott and I will be there to answer your questions, but also just to give you a sort of bird's eye view of what we're about here. We are looking for volunteers who will be available to help with snow removal on those days when we get the parking lot plowed, but we need to take care of the pathways ourselves. So if this is something that you'd be willing to do, please sign up at the kiosk. Next Sunday, we've got a couple of exciting things. We do have our monthly second Sunday Nourish food drive, but more importantly, our leadership development committee, that it's part of their commission, if you will, to build leadership within the congregation. They're offering a collaborative, which means that all of the groups represented in the congregation will have representatives there, but we also invite everybody to attend if you're curious about leadership, or if you're really feeling like, oh, maybe I want to take a step in closer, then this is for you. There is a sign up at the kiosk, and the title of next Sunday's collaborative is Leading with Love in Turbulent Times. So this is a real, it's sort of an inner and outer training. So we really invite you to consider coming to this. I believe a little bit of nosh is provided. Yes, food is provided, so it's after the service. And there's an error in the Skyline. Human report. It only goes till 1. So 11:30 to 1. So that's a really manageable, and I'm sure it will be very, very nourishing and meaningful. This Thursday night is the XYZ group, and for anyone born after 1964, 4. I think that's where the boomers fall off. But anyway, the millennials, Gen X, I should remind myself not to define a group by what it's not, but all the same. XYZ, you're invited on Thursday night at 7 in the library. And this is, the group is hoping to really kind of get a sense of what you'll be doing for this year in the coming months. So that's Thursday night at 7. I do want to highlight the difference between the Women's Connection Book Club, which meets on Tuesday morning, and the Women's Connection Book Chat, which meets on Wednesday afternoon. And this week, it just happens to be that they're in the same week, so you can attend both. You don't get extra credit, but it will be lovely. Then the last thing that I want to say is that on Wednesday, this Wednesday, Reverend Scott and I will again host an opportunity. It's actually a no-host coffee, but Reverend Scott and I will be at McMiniman's in the smoke room. It's a buy-your-own-beverage sort of affair, but again, mostly for newcomers, but if you have a question and just want to come out and see what's going on, we invite you to come there as well. Okay. Did I say Happy New Year? But I didn't say blessings on your day.
We're talking today about the stories that we tell ourselves. This congregation, when I arrived 7.5 years ago, was telling itself the story of, I just wish we did more social justice. I wish we were more engaged in the community and we're active. I just wish that that's what we were doing. And when I would listen to the congregation, that's the narrative that I heard. And as I spent time here in that first year and I looked around, I realized that that narrative wasn't true. But it was the narrative that we were telling ourselves, and we believed it. What I saw that first year was a congregation who was deeply involved in 5 different social justice activities, all of them well-staffed with congregational volunteer support, and all of them growing. And they've grown into 8, I think now, 8 or 9 different social justice things. But then that first year, the narrative was, no, we don't do enough social justice. Wish we did more. We had to retell ourselves our narrative, and we did that. That was the whole project of our annual report, was to tell ourselves our true narrative so we can stop living in a false narrative about ourselves, and we can still be critical of ourselves. We can still do more. We can still grow. But it's a good example of how sometimes we can have the wrong understanding of our collective life or even of our own life. The stories that we tell ourselves are important. One of the stories I can tell that is true is this is a generous congregation. All of the activities in the life of this congregation are made possible by the generous gifts of this gathered group of folks. And so in that spirit, this morning we'll take our morning offering. That's officially the funkiest I've ever felt as I begin Joys and Sorrows. I have a joy for funky music I'd like to express to the congregation. That is not written on one of these sheets. This congregation shares our joys and sorrows and gratitudes as a part of our congregational life together. Our forms for this are on the kiosk. If you have a written joy or sorrow you'd like to share with the entire congregation, I read those aloud up here. And if there's a joy or a sorrow in your heart this morning that you would like to light a candle for, those are on the sides of our sanctuary. Please feel free to do so. So we have three this morning. Diane Darling shares that this morning I lit a candle in honor of my late beloved mother's 92nd birthday. She is the woman who taught me, my feelings are my feelings. Never right, never wrong. It's what I do with them that matters. Happy birthday, Mom. Well, thanks, Diane's mom. I think that's good for us all here. From Diane's mom, your feelings are your feelings, never right, never wrong. It's what you do with them. And the staff just wants to share joy that Paul, as Chayla was saying earlier, our fellow congregant who fainted last week, came by this morning to say he is totally fine. So, if you were wondering how that thread ends and is looped back in, that is how. Paul is a cyclist and a runner, and he said he made the mistake of no caloric intake before rushing off to get to service. He was grateful for all of our help and care, and he is here today. So, yes, while we appreciate people's dedication for getting here, have breakfast first, maybe. And Judy Hurlbert shares, oh, joy for friends, family, and community, and grandma's potatoes for Christmas dinner. We'll invite us into a time of spoken reflection, and then we'll have a time of shared silence together, understanding that these two things kind of work together sometimes. There's content, there's ideas, there's instruction, there's sounds, and those can fill us up and inspire us, and then sometimes it's good to just sit, be still and quiet, and let the world and ourselves work within us. So I invite you just to take a deep breath, if that helps you center it all, as we create a space for reflection, for being present, for being open, for being ourselves. These are the words of Ann Tyndall as we prepare for this new year. This morning I walked the dog up the street. It was a perfect winter's morning. An icy breeze was blowing. Clouds were gathered in the sky. As the sun rose, the gray-white sky turned to rosy smoke. The sun finally appeared in the east. Nothing extraordinary, but the moment offered a blessing on the new day. Such blessings we have been given daily for more millions of years than we can ever imagine. I'm reminded that what will get us through times of rapid change, hard times, times of uncertainty, dangerous times, will be our ability to be blessed and fed by abiding things. The manifold blessings of the sun rising in the morning. The song of a bird, heard as if for the first time. The stillness of the night. The smile of a baby, offered to you as if she had just been waiting for you to show up. The faithfulness of lovers and friends. The hand outstretched in reconciliation, trembling, touching through the barriers of estrangement, healing again and again, the persistence of love. The persistence of love. The persistence of love. In this new year, may you know more blessings than curses. May your hand reach out more than clench. And may you be claimed more by love than indifference, more by hope than by fear or cynicism. May the creative power rise up in you, grounding you and guiding you to the border of what is yet possible for you, those close to you, and for the entire world. I first found out about the concept of a ghostwriter. Do you know what a ghostwriter is? Like when someone writes a book like about themselves and then somebody else is actually writing it for them? I remember when I first found out about the idea of a ghostwriter, I thought to myself, what? I've been had. That makes no sense. That's not that person's story. What business do they have writing it? It doesn't have their name on it. It's not written by them, even though it is. I felt had. I'm looking up here because we have one up here. And then I realized, oh wait, that makes complete sense. Because if I was in charge of writing my autobiography without anybody else having a say in it, editing it, helping me write it, giving me perspective, it would be a very limited, very bad, and very non-representational autobiography of what my life actually was. Because I have a story of what my life and arc has been, and everyone around me has a story of what my narrative life and arc has been, and those two things don't always equate to the same story. And so it makes sense that a ghostwriter would help us in creating our story. It would make sense that we reach out to other people to fill in blanks in our story. There are people who know us better than ourselves sometimes. Surely you've had this humbling experience, someone close to you, who gives you perspective on yourself, and you think to yourself, oh, they're right. I'm wrong about me. I thought I had the insider information on that one. But no, this person on the outside has a perspective on me that I didn't quite understand or have in full. We don't know what we don't know, they say. And yet, we do have these outside narrative arcs that everyone else engages with. We engage them with the people around us. We see this. Like Chayla said yesterday, we had a celebration of life for Trisha Bell. And in all the sharing, there was this story of this beautiful person's loving life that emerged. And yet it emerged from all the different people that she had touched in her lives. And only through her first-person account and everyone else around her first-person account will we then get an actual arc of what a life looked like. Which is a way of saying I don't know that there's an objective truth when it comes to the story of our life. Yes, there are facts that happen to us, but we take those facts and we turn them into narratives. We turn them into stories. Just think upon your life at all the different ways the facts of your life are interpreted differently by different people. Maybe your siblings. If any of you has siblings, you can be certain that you have very different views on what it is the narrative arc of your life looks like, even though yours is right, of course. Of course. Well, we have stories that we tell ourselves. This is a very human thing we do, despite all the facts. There's an area of research called narrative psychology, and it's an emerging study field, about 30 years old, and it examines how stories, the stories we tell ourselves, shape our personalities, and actually then in turn shape our lives. The stories that we tell ourselves shape the very existence of our lives. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio explained, consciousness begins when the brain gains the power, the simple power I might add, he says, of telling a story. This neuroscientist would say that consciousness begins when we begin to tell ourselves the story of ourselves. We all have one particularly important story that we tell ourselves, and that is our life story. This life story that we recount, our own personal narrative from our first memory. That's a question you get sometimes in your life. What's your first memory? Do you remember? Some of us might, some of us might not. Some of us might have made it up, like, oh, I'll choose that one because that'll work as well as anything. And there, our story begins, when our memory begins. And this gives us an organizing experience of having a sense of self. We're constantly then updating our story every day, every minute, every moment. Happy new moment. Dan McAdams is at Northwestern University as a psychology professor, and he wrote this book, The Redemptive Self, Stories Americans Live By. And he says the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives don't just shape our personalities. These stories actually are our personalities. Our personalities are all created by the stories that we tell ourselves. The story we tell about our lives is a sort of cognitive script that helps us understand how it is we came to be the way we are and where we think our lives are going. And this gives us some sense of meaning and purpose. Imagine if you didn't have a life story, if you didn't have an arc. It's impossible to imagine. You exist on this timeline between birth and death. You're somewhere in there. None of us know when that one's coming, the death part. But you exist somewhere in this narrative you've created out of your own experience and those stories that people have told you about yourself around you. He goes on to write, McAdams, that life is incredibly complex, and there are lots of things going on in our environment and in our lives at all times. And in order to hold on to our experience, we need to make meaning out of it. And the way we make that meaning is by structuring our lives into stories. And so I invite you just to think back, pull out 3 big things that happen in your life. 3 big things. You don't have to say them out loud, but what are 3 little tent posts in the arc of your story? Maybe it's someone's birth. Maybe it's someone's death. Maybe it's finding love. Maybe it's losing love. Maybe it's the best job you ever got and that started a career. Maybe it's losing the best job you ever had, ending that part of your career. These stories show up in all kinds of different ways. McAdams continues that it's not an easy undertaking because we contain multitudes, as Whitman wrote in his poem. And by multitudes, says McAdams, he means libraries. Libraries and libraries of stories within each one of us. You might have an overarching narrative for your whole life, but different narratives are for different realms of your life, your career, your romance, your family, your faith. Each one of these intersect and diverge and contradict each other, all of them at the same time. And so to make our one life story, we do what researchers call autobiographical reasoning about the events. We identify lessons learned or insights gained in life experiences, marking our development or our growth or some kind of shift in our life through these sequences or scenes, and they show us how our specific life illustrates some idea of our enduring truth of what life is. McAdams looks at how we do this as basically like 3 aspects of our sense of self. We know our sense of self is how we consider who we are in the world, a collection of stories and values and environmental pressures and ideas put upon us. Pretty much from birth, he says, we are actors. We have personality traits, and we interact in the world, and we have roles that we play. Daughter or a sister, the neighbor's new baby that cries all night and keeps you up. And when you get old enough, you start to have goals. You become agents. You have agency in life, some choice. Still playing your roles and interacting, ask your siblings again, but we are beginning to make decisions with the hopes of producing desired outcomes. We have agency. And the final layer is author. When we begin to bundle our ideas about the future with experiences from the past and present to form this sense of narrative self over time. We do this in the structure of a novel. I mentioned I was an English major. The narrative arc, the beginning, the rising action, the conflict, the heightened action, the resolution, and then the end. Now, we all know that we experience that over and over in our lives. It's not just one big, neat, and tidy arc. But we cycle through this pattern over and over. As we were reminded this morning at our Time for All Ages, conflict is a part of life. Conflict is a part of narrative stories. And if our lives are narrative stories, then of course we have experienced that conflict, we all know, is an intricate part of our lives. So this episodic quality is a natural part of our memory and our future thinking. And our brain creates these narratives to give us structure. Structure. And that's nice in this existential mystery that we call life, that in truth, no matter who stands in a pulpit and might tell you they have the answer or some definitive understanding of what's happening, we don't. No one knows what's going on. No one. And so, that won't stand. So we create narratives and structures to make sense of our realities. We think of our lives chronologically, dividing up our experiences into chapters based on our major life events. Our young years, our adolescence, our schooling, maybe it's our geographical location, our jobs, major family events, and so on. And the research in cognitive science has reinforced the idea that it's natural for people to separate our lives into these broad units. It would seem that we are both, at one time, the narrator of our own lives, inside our own head, in our own experience, the actor, the agency. And also, it seems that we are the author. We take dictation around what has been done, as a ghostwriter might. And we also are the ones doing the action, living with agency. And for that, there is a reason to be overjoyed. Overjoyed. Wouldn't it be great if we could hear a Stevie Wonder song played on the saxophone right now, titled Overjoyed? imagine what it would be like to be Jimmy Carter and look at your wife, Rosalind, who you love so much, and have the thought, wow, Rosalind, do you remember a long time ago when I was president? Like 40 plus years ago when I was the president of the United States? Remember that? Those were some times, weren't they? Because in the 40 years after, he did so much. As we know, Jimmy Carter died last Sunday at the age 100. And in those 40 plus years after he lost the presidency, he went on to do amazing things, write books around peace, do exploration into how we might curate peace between countries. He did infectious disease research and started a foundation around that. And of course, we all picture him swinging a hammer dedicated to Habitat for Humanity. He did all these things after he lost his re-election bid tremendously. I mean, he got slapped by Reagan. It wasn't even close. And when historians look back on his presidency, there's in this last week been a lot of rose-tinted glasses. People are like, oh no, he was actually pretty good after all. But in the moment, it was probably pretty clear for him that it didn't go well. And that was a defeat, a hard defeat. And if his story had stopped there, well, I guess that's where we would stop hearing of his influence. But it didn't stop there. He kept going. And this is very indicative of this idea of how it is we frame and consider our story. Carter said, failure is a reality. We all fail at times, and it's painful when we do, but it's better to fail while striving for something wonderful, challenging, adventurous, and uncertain to say, I don't want to try because I might not succeed completely. He also said, we cannot change the history of the past. We also cannot ignore the gift of our future. And so we find ourselves here in this new year, that time where a lot of us do some reflective thinking about our stories, what they have been, what they might be. But in this moment, more pressingly, what are we doing right now in creating our ongoing story? And how might we tweak, change, adapt the living out of our story a little bit so that who we hope to be is in a little bit more of a line with how we hope our story plays out. I've heard it said that you can't change the future by changing the past because you can't change the past. The past is there, the past is done. It's a hodgepodge of experiences for us to draw from in creating our story. And so the first thing we are called to do is to be honest about those stories before we even begin to give them value or create narratives. James Baldwin said, I think that the past is all that makes the present coherent, and further the past will remain horrible for exactly as long as we refuse to assess it honestly. So when we look at our past and our experiences, we hope to discern some truth to our story. We hope to remove our bias, our hopes, our rose-tinted glasses of what we hoped had happened, what we wished had happened, and find the real story, the one that is true, sometimes the one that is glorious, and sometimes the one that makes us awfully uncomfortable. A lot of us have pasts and experiences that are difficult. We've had things done to us, tragedies befall us, or we've participated in our own hardships, our own colossal missteps. All of these, we have pasts. Some great stories, some difficult stories. And so as we are honest with ourselves, we offer ourselves congratulations, sometimes rightfully so, and sometimes we offer ourselves some self-compassion, some self-forgiveness. That first marriage that failed, or the second, or the third. Our unfulfilled dreams that we just haven't gotten to yet, maybe being an activist or an artist or a parent. That career that didn't go quite like we had thought. That addiction that took the life in a different path than imagined. The relationship that we thought was going somewhere fantastic, either through love or just through friendship, that ended poorly, or a frustrated dream never realized. So today, let me bring down the temperature for you by letting you know that the person to your left, the person to your right, the person in front of you, and the person behind you all have the same kind of story in their back. All of us having failures, missteps, all of us having gloriful things that we are proud of. You're not special. I mean, you are special because you're unique, but you're not that kind of special. It's not just you. In fact, it's actually all of us. All of us, despite our own individual life stories, have this shared way of living life that makes it very human. Sometimes this makes us feel great. Sometimes it makes us feel like it's just us. It can't be. But let me assure you, it's all of us. We're all human. You're not defined by this past that happened to you. You're you. And your story is still being shaped. One journalist says the difference between despair and hope is just a different way of telling stories from the same set of facts. And so it's important, our perspective on our story. Our perspective that tells us what those experiences might mean. Here's one that might seem trite for me, but I guarantee you it's not. There's a stack of books. We actually got a bookshelf to put it next to my bed because the stack had become stacks and stacks. Now, all these are books that are not in my own other large stacks of books in my bookshelf in my office here, but they're ones that went home with all honest intention of being read by me. A whole bookshelf full. Now, some of them have the first chapter read. Some of them even have like 2 chapters read. But most of them either are just intentions unfulfilled or intentions just scraped the top of. And so, when I look at this bookshelf, the story that I tell myself is unfulfilled, failure, not reaching what I'm hoping, setting goals, falling short, not getting the knowledge that I want, not shaping my life in the way that I hope I become. Sharing this story with someone recently, and they said, maybe you just like books. That's a very different story. My story ended in me feeling bad about myself. It ended in me feeling defeated. It ended in me like getting into this feeling of longing, and I'm just not doing life the way that I want. Her story was much gentler, much nicer, and quite frankly, true. Quite true. And so the next time someone walked into my office and they said, wow, you've got a lot of books. And if you're ever in my office, I have not read them all. I guarantee you. I've read some of them. I've read some of them, and a lot I've not read any of. Wow, you've got a lot of books. And I looked at the shelf, and I looked at her, and I said, well, I like books. And it felt completely different. There's this idea of redemption sequences and contamination sequences in this narrative psychology. In redemptive sequences, stories start bad and end good. In contamination sequences, stories start good and end bad. All lives have good and bad in them. So these themes are really about where we stop the story and the connective pieces between them. Where does the story end? And where does it begin? If you keep telling yourself that the story continues, if you look at those hardships and say, that story's not done, what did I learn? Who did it make me? How am I still becoming who I am to be? The psychology says that is one of the things that creates well-being in our mental health and in our lives. It makes us feel empowered. If we stop the story where we're defeated, where we feel bad about ourselves, that leads us to feeling defeated, not having agency, and to feeling generally crummy inside. Now, this all might sound like making lemonade out of lemons, right? Oh, something bad happened. Just make it good. Well, y'all, lemonade's good. I like lemonade. And if I have a pile of lemons and don't know what to do with them, why not make some lemonade, especially if it's going to help my mental health and my sense of agency in the world? That is why we should feel overjoyed. It's because people really can change. You can take control of your own story. Our life story, says Jonathan Adler, another one of the narrative psychologists, is written in chalk, not ink, and it can be changed. You're both the narrator and the main character of your story. That can sometimes be a revelation. Oh, I'm not just living out this story, I'm actually in charge of this story. The past is always up for grabs, he says, and this shapes our future. So while we can't change what happened in the past, he would say the past is still up for grabs in how we roll it into our life story and the perspective we take upon it. Brene Brown says, when we deny our stories and disengage from the tough, these stories don't go away. They own us. They define us. Our job is to not deny the story, but to define the ending, to rise strong, recognize our story, rumble with the truth until we get to the place where we think, yes, this is what happened. This is my truth. And now I will choose how this story ends. If you're sitting here, congratulations. Your story's not done. Every single person in here. Your story is not done. Redemption is always possible. Our Unitarian Universalist ancestors are on our Universalist side would have us remember this, that God is love and that all are reunited with God in the end, as they were trying to grapple with a theology of hell, and they said simply, no. No way, no how. All are redeemable, and all are redeemed in the end. Dick Gilbert writes, celebrate the interval. That life is brief in its interval between birth and death. It's composed of a few notes between prelude and postlude. It's a drama quickly played between the rising and falling of a curtain. What shall we do with that interval of time? What combinations of notes shall we play? The brevity of day is full of pain. Discordant notes reverberate in the soul. The ending of the play is ever in doubt. Why then are we so careless with time? Why do we not sound the music of our hearts? Is it not time to play our own melody? Life is the brief interval between birth and death. May we celebrate this interval with joy. May we sing the song belonging to us, and may we act as though our very life depended on it, because it does. Congratulations. Your story is not over. It is so. Amen. You please rise in body or spirit as we sing a song that invites us to have faith as we go forward into this unknown, unfinished story.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You're going, where we are going, but we know within. And we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, and we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah, yeah.
Please say together as we begin this new year, a promise that we make to each other that lasts over time, the covenant of this fellowship. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our covenant, together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Happy New Year. Happy New Day. Happy New Hour. Happy New Minute. Happy New Moment. Go in peace, go with love, and go for justice. Amen.